When you don't open those hips, we start to have the hips go toward the ball, we lose our posture, we flip the golf club. It's extremely frustrating. And no matter how hard you try to open and open and open, you watch it on video and it looks exactly the same. Well, there's actually one missing piece with this. It has to do with your knees, and I'm gonna go over it. Once you learn this trick, it becomes so much easier to open the hips. We're gonna talk about how to do that in a step-by-step process. It's gonna be really easy and really fun to do that. Why is it exactly that it's bad to not have the hips open through contact? And the main reason is when you're not opening your hips, what's happening is your body is locking up sooner and your hands and arms have to do all the work. So I like to imagine that my body is almost creating the momentum in the golf swing. So if I imagine myself kind of encased in a giant concrete block, well, I'm gonna use the big muscles of my body, my legs, my hips, my upper torso, to be able to move that big concrete block, that boulder, that wrecking ball. If you can kind of imagine being encased in that, I'm getting the momentum of my swing happening from the big pieces of my body, from my feet to my shoulders, create the momentum. That's why it's so important to have the hips opening up. That momentum gets started toward the target. Now from there, our hands and arms add to that momentum to get that flash of speed, that real snap happening at the golf ball. That's what gets you really high club head speeds. So my body creates the momentum, my hands and arms are lagging back, my club is lagging back, and then bam, I want to release all that to create a ton of club head speed right at the golf ball. Now, when I stall out my body and I don't have that momentum going, my hips stay square to the ball, what ends up happening is, as I start my downswing, my hips lock up, they stay facing the golf ball, all of this slows down, the momentum is cut off, and now to keep some kind of speed in the swing, I have to flip with my hands and arms to force that club through contact. Let me show you what one of those looks like real quick. So there, even though I hit that one pretty solid, I'm gonna lose 20, 30, even 40 yards off my drives. I'm gonna get inconsistent because I'm flipping. I'm gonna get inconsistent because I'm standing up out of my posture, and now I have to kind of save contact with my hands. That's the negatives from slowing down your body and not opening the hips. Now let's talk about what to do to solve this problem. All right, so what is this missing piece? This missing piece that we've been leaving out is bending the legs. Now I want you to imagine when I'm opening up, that's the same as me kind of twisting or jumping. If I was gonna do, jump up and do a 180 or a 360 or really spin around like that, what I would have to do first is I'd have to bend my knees and load my body, and then straighten my knees, push into the ground to make my body turn. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Lock your knees straight like you would if you're losing your posture and your hips get locked up in the golf swing. Lock your knees straight and now try to jump up and twist. There's no way you can do it. It's impossible, right? You can't do that. You don't have any muscles to move your hips. So if I want to get these hips opening, I first have to bend the legs. And there's an easy drill to do this. And what we can do is go to the top of the swing, and the first move I want you to do down is to squat with your knees. So I'm gonna go to the dress position, again, without hitting a ball at first. I'm going to the top, I bend my knees, and now from here, I'm kind of loaded into the ground. I'm gonna feel like I push into the ground to get those hips open, coming through contact. If I feel like my knees straighten, then that's not really gonna work. Now, the piece that also plays in with this, which also works great with your irons, is that if I'm locking my legs up, if I'm standing up out of my posture, let me grab an iron real quick. When I do that, my club shaft gets more vertical. So let's imagine I'm hitting a golf ball off the ground here. As I stand up out of my posture, my hands get higher, the club shaft gets higher, and when that happens, the toe of the club actually starts to dig into the ground. So if you look at your divots, if you're someone that turns off the hips, stands up out of your posture, you're gonna notice the toe side of the divot starts first. And that's because this shaft, the sole of the club isn't perfectly parallel with the ground. This shaft stands up and the toe digs in first. So it's going to solve a little bit of two problems at once. So when you're making these swings, when you bend your legs and we're trying to open the hips, that's going to be a really good key to tie all that in together. I want my club shaft to go from here at contact being much more vertical to feeling like my club shaft is lower, almost like the heel of the club is coming down into the ground. So what I'm going to do is go to the top of the swing, get my little squat, and then I'm going to rehearse coming down to contact, feeling like the heel of the club is lower down, my shaft is lower down, and my hips are more open. And then from there, swing all the way on through. Now, once you've done just a few of those, pausing just to get the overall idea, now we need to make it more fluid, so it's going to be more like your real swing. So here, going to the top of the swing, a little squat, engaging my legs. Now my heel's lower, and I can go ahead and swing on through, feeling like the club shaft is lower when I'm doing that. Now, let's take a look at Jacob French, who's been a member of the Top Speed Golf website for a while. He's done this exact change in his golf swing. And what you'll notice in his after video, look how much lower he is to the ground and how he's able to open up his body much more, stay in his posture perfectly. And man, he's just got a beautiful looking golf swing. That's the kind of swing that we'd all love to have. You can definitely see that that shaft is not standing up like this. He's hitting the ball pretty daggone pure there. So if that's the case, let's go into even more what the feet do, and I think that'll help you to break through this habit once and for all. So when I'm making that downswing squat, or that end of the backswing squat and starting my downswing, so I'm here at the top, I'm starting to bend my legs, what exactly is going on with my legs to be able to open up my hips? Now when I open up my hips, there's two things that are happening. The right foot is actually pushing this way, and that's happening from your toe. So when you see good players, a lot of times when they swing, that toe is going to stay on the ground. It's pushing down and back that way, and the heel starts to come up as they go through the ball. That's a good thing. When I push down that way, that pushes my hip forward and around. That's what gets my right hip to move forward. Now, in the opposite direction, your left heel is doing the exact opposite of that to get your left hip to come back and open up. So as I get into that squat, now my left heel, this part, is going to be pushing out in this direction. So it's pushing out, and that takes my hip and pushes it this way. So I'm really exaggerating there, but you'll see a lot of pro players, their front foot, their toe will start to come off the ground sometimes when they're opening up. You'll see their foot kind of swivel like that. That's because their heel is pushing into the ground. That pushes the hip back, and that allows you to rotate. So again, let's take that into this same drill and do a few reps of that. Go to the top of the swing, a little squat, and then feel your feet push into the ground to rotate those hips open. The club shaft is lower, and then we're gonna go ahead and finish the swing. Do a few more without any pauses at all. There we go. Now we can really see the feet engaging, rotating our hips open. I mean, that looks really fantastic there. So let's go ahead and give it a whirl now. We saw the earlier swing didn't have a lot of distance on it. Let's try to do one where I stay in my posture and see if we can really crank one out there. All right, killed that ball. So much more power when you're adding the momentum of your body to get things started, and then I can get my hands, arms, and club releasing on through. Well, there's two parts of the system that this all ties in with. Number one is the power turn. When I talk about really loading up my body, getting into the ground where I can leverage it, and then finishing all the way around, really that's the power turn. The power turn mostly focuses on your shoulders, but what's going to happen when we move our shoulders is that makes it so much easier to engage the legs and rotate around to a good full finish. Now the second part of this is the straight line release. Once your hips start opening more, it makes it so much easier to get that lag, and then now that my hips are opening out in front, I can release that club in front. My hips, my shoulders, my hands, my arms, my club, everything is going to want to release in front of that golf ball to that straight line release point. And you can even see that same thing with Jacob here. Now the cool thing about this, when you're opening your hips and the straight line release, both of those concepts work with every club in the bag, whether you're using a pitching wedge or a driver. We'll see here originally in the video, Jacob's standing up, flipping a little bit, losing his posture, and that club is releasing early. Now in this after video, we're going to see him opening up the hips much better like we saw, releasing that club much more in front, and now he's got a lot more consistency in his swing, a lot better contact when that's happening. You should be able to hit one that sounds just like the pros, especially when the pros are hitting those nice easy shots. They're not even swinging hard. Well, shouldn't we be able to do that? And why is it that when we hit the center of the face, it just never sounds like that? Most players, especially off a tight lie, if you struggle off a tight lie, I guarantee you that this is something that's happening for you. When you stand up out of that posture, the hands go out, the club has to drop down to be able to reach the ground, and the shaft gets too vertical at impact. So with a shallow swing, shallowed out, swinging under here, the club is at this nice angle. If I start to get steep, pop up out of my posture, now all of a sudden the club is much more vertical. Now you may be asking yourself, okay, I hear you saying that, but isn't that just a lie angle problem? Shouldn't I just be adjusting the lie angle to fit my swing? Even with properly fit clubs, you can only bend a club a few degrees. Most players, that's not going to be enough to make a difference. In fact, if I took 100 players I've taught, a sample set of 100 players, 90-something% of them are gonna have the club too toe down or have this club shaft too vertical. On top of that, when TrackMan and other launch monitor radars measured people's vertical swing plane, which is tightly related to this, they found that the more vertical the swing plane, the higher the handicap of the player. As swing planes got lower, handicaps got less. As swing planes got lower, contact got more solid. And most players have way too vertical of a swing plane. So what's going on here is that if I take this giant club, it really illustrates this pretty well. Imagine I'm hitting a golf ball toward the camera and the lie angle of the club, or the sole of the club, is perfectly flat. Well, that's what this is representing, the proper vertical swing plane and lie angle. If I can miss this stick, the sole of my club is going to be flat, I'm going to have a nice square divot, and the golf ball is going to be able to hit on the sweet spot there. If I pop up out of my posture all of a sudden, not only do I stand up, the toe of the club starts to get lower than the heel, and now all of a sudden if I was to hit this same golf ball, it would be very thin, or it would pull it a couple grooves low, especially on tight lies. Now if you are able to hit it solid on these kind of fluffed up lies, well, that's bringing the golf ball higher, and now I have some room to stand up, get the toe down, and still hit it solid. But as soon as I get on those tighter lies, I really struggle. That's a surefire sign that this is something that would be a perfect thing for you to work on. So what I want to feel here is I want to feel like my hips go back this way toward the wall. I want to feel like my heel of the club is almost lower than the toe of the club as I'm doing this. And I really like to feel like I want to stay behind the golf ball. I don't want to slide out here in front of it. So if I'm looking from this direction, I don't want to slide way up here. I want to feel like I get closer to the ground with my chest, but I keep my nose almost back here toward this alignment stick rather than kind of sliding up in front of the golf ball. So I'm going to feel like this. Butt goes back, arms and heel are lower, and I'm going to keep my nose kind of almost back here just inside this alignment stick to be lined up properly. And if I can do that, I'm going to hit it pretty daggone solid and stay in my posture all the way through. Now the last thing I like to do with this that really ties it all in together, most people when they're doing this drill, as soon as you try what I just told you and you get your hands down below this stick, you get your body working down toward the ground, you're going to think, I am way too daggone close to the ground. There's no way I'm going to be able to hit this solid. And that would actually be the case if I stay down there and I still throw the club or flip it. I'm going to bury this club 6, 8, 10 inches in the ground. Throw the alignment stick into the wedge impact position. And even when you're hitting your irons, we won't have quite this much shaft lean when we're actually hitting an iron. But try to mimic a little bit more of that shaft lean or my hands going forward even when I'm hitting a 6-iron like this. So all I want you to do, same feelings as we just did, but get the hands in front to keep the club from digging in the ground. You see, if I'm down in my posture and I cast the club, smacking into the ground. If I get shaft lean and rotate, I'm going to hit it really nice and solid, and that club's going to glide through the turf rather than digging. The cool thing is this is set at a little bit of an angle. It's a bit upright for a 6-iron. But if I can do the same feelings again and try to match a little bit of that shaft lean, it's not going to be quite that much lean, then I'm going to hit some really solid ones. Grab a Blue Brick today, stay in your posture, and compress the golf ball just like the pros.